I'd like to welcome you to the interactive case study for Session 4, God's Perspective on Debt. This story is about Mike and Sharon. The names have been selected at random, but I think you'll see that the facts of their circumstances is very, very common. Mike and Sharon are Christians. They both work full-time and earn average incomes. Over several years, they regularly spend more than they were earning and accumulated a lot of debt. Significant credit card debt, combined with a large mortgage and 2 car loan payments, resulted in frequent arguments between Mike and Sharon to the point that they were both considering a divorce. So here's the first question. What do you think Mike and Sharon should do? Consider the 5 following choices and select the best option for Mike and Sharon. A. Declare bankruptcy in order to eliminate the debt and preserve their marriage. B. Obtain a personal line of credit from their bank in order to pay off their expensive credit card debt and spread the payments out over several years. C. Develop and implement a budget to ensure that they spend less than they earn each month so they have a surplus to pay down debt. D. Learn and implement God's financial principles. And E. Ignore their financial problems and hope that they go away. So I'd encourage you to stop the video at this point and consider those 5 options. Discuss it if you're in a group, and then start the video once you've written down your best selections. Select the best option, perhaps even put down what you think is the second best option, and then come back in a few minutes and I'll provide my comments. Welcome back. So what do you think Mike and Sharon should do amongst those 5 options? The first one, for those who chose declare bankruptcy in order to eliminate the debt and preserve their marriage, I would have these comments. First of all, this is not God's will. Why? Because bankruptcy is a sin. Psalms 37:21 says, "The wicked borrow and do not repay." Secondly, bankruptcy is a bad testimony. If you look at Matthew 5:16, it's clear that anyone that goes bankrupt is not a light into a world of darkness. It's not a good testimony for the Lord. And 3, perhaps the most important one as well, is the fact that bankruptcy treats the symptom and not the problem. Why? Because the bad habits, the violation of biblical principles in the area of finances will likely continue even after they are cleared through bankruptcy. And more often than not, people who have gone bankrupt get into trouble again within several years. One of the problems is that Mike and Sharon have not been content with God's provision. That is, they've been spending more than they earn. In 1 Timothy 6, Paul said, "But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we have brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that." In other words, their lack of contentment with God's provision and their mismanagement of money will likely continue after the bankruptcy. For those who chose option B, that is, obtain a personal line of credit from their bank in order to pay off their expensive credit card debt, I would have these comments. Restructuring the debt can lower interest costs and help their cash flow, but it does not deal with the root cause of the problem, which was the violation of biblical principles, which may include an unwillingness to live within God's provision. Remember in Luke 9:23, Jesus said, "If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself, pick up his cross daily, and follow me." Also, their worldly attitudes towards money, such as selfishness, covetousness, and lack of contentment, will all continue. Further, the fact that they've had no budget, they'll likely continue to have no budget, and violate the biblical principle provided by Christ in the parable of the tower, Luke 14-28, where Jesus admonished us to plan ahead. In order to plan ahead, it's important that you have a budget or a spending plan of some kind. Next, they were not aware of their financial facts. In Proverbs 27:23, it says, "Know well the condition of your herds and flocks and grains." They did not know where they were at financially. They were just operating based on personal desires and gut feel. And finally, they used debt very freely. In Deuteronomy 28, God promised his people that if they fully obeyed him, they would not have to borrow money. He would meet their needs. Now, for those who answered C, develop and implement a budget to ensure that they spend less than they earn each month so they have a surplus to pay down debt, I would say this. This is one of the first practical steps that Mike and Sharon should take, but it's not complete. The most important is that Mike and Sharon need to understand that they are stewards of God's money, Haggai 2:8, and therefore they must look to God and his word as to how they should manage God's money. In 1 Corinthians 4:2, it says, whoever has been given a trust must prove faithful. And whatever money we've been entrusted with, we need to prove that we're faithful to the Lord. And with 2,350 references in the Bible to money and material things, and 16 parables from Christ, God's Word has lots of wisdom on finances. D, learn and implement God's financial principles. I believe this is the best of the 5 answers. As demonstrated by their excessive spending, Mike and Sharon have been violating biblical principles. In order to change the way they think about money, they need to transform their mind. As it says in Romans 12:2, do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. They need to renew their mind in God's Word. They need to get into God's Word on a regular basis, meditate on God's Word, as it talks about in Joshua 1:8. They must prayerfully ask God for His wisdom. James 1:5 says, if any of us lack wisdom, we should ask God, and He will give it to us abundantly. And they need to ask God for His direction. In Psalms 32:8, God promised, I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you and watch over you. They need to develop and implement a budget to ensure that they are spending less than their income. And in dependence on God, they must learn to be content with God's provision and diligently follow up. E, for those who selected E, ignore their financial problems and hope that they go away. I would have these comments. Unfortunately, this is what most people would do. That is, they would do nothing and hope that the problems go away. However, ignoring one's financial problems is foolish, as the debt will continue to increase and will be more difficult to deal with at a later date. Mike and Sharon must deal with their financial problems from a biblical perspective immediately. They must understand that God has promised to meet their needs, not their wants and desires, and they must learn and apply God's financial principles. To learn more, check out CoplandFinancialMinistries.org.